Hi, I'm Mark Hess. I'm with the Office of Communications, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here this morning. And before we start, I thought I'd share a little anecdote, because I wore, in honor of our guest this morning, I wore my little shuttle mirror shirt. I know a lot of you are here for the summer, a lot of college interns, and so this shirt goes back to before you were born, when there was a program called Shuttle Mir, which is when the shuttle first docked to a Russian space station called the Mir in about the early 1990s. So if you want a history lesson, find me after the program and I'll share what life was like at the Plasticine era when I first started working at NASA. So anyway, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Center Director for Science, Dr. Colleen Hartman.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here, and it's my pleasure to welcome astronaut Mike Hopkins to Goddard here today. I probably am definitely born before any of the students here, many years, and I want to say that I've been around for 33 years at NASA and watched the ISS being constructed. So talking to Mike this morning was just a pure pleasure, and he'll share amazing stories with you. And here at Goddard, we're looking forward to giving Mike more to put onto the ISS in terms of science and exploration payloads. You students hopefully will see some of that on your visits here for this summer. Let me tell you a little bit about Mike. He grew up in Richland, Missouri, and received his Bachelor's of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Illinois in '91. He was a scholar and an athlete, although he tells me that might be just a tad of a fish story. But I don't think so, because he was team captain of the UI football team called the Fighting Illini. Did I say that right? Illini? Oh gosh. Illini, good, because apparently Mike was as a junior, won the Big Ten championship and played in the Hall of Fame Bowl. All true. So as a shout out to his school, his Twitter account is apparently Astro Illini. So look him up. Mike went on to earn a Master's of Science in Aerospace Engineering from Stanford in '92. And he was ROTC all along. He joined the U.S. Air Force and distinguished himself as a top flight test engineer. He enjoyed duty stations in Alberta, Canada, Monterey, California, my home, Parma, Italy, yay, and Washington, D.C., from test pilot to special assistant to the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He then rose to the rank of colonel. So students out there, take note, ask him tons of questions about how he took this path. He was selected in the astronaut class in 2009. In 2013, he sat on top of a rocket, a Soyuz rocket, which launched him to the ISS. And he was 166 days in space. He had multiple spacewalks. He repaired a degraded pump module while he was on station. And he's only been walking on this planet for the last 3 months since that time. So he's got his sea legs, but apparently his frequent flyer miles were all revoked. So we're very thrilled to have him and to hear his stories about his life in the ISS. So please join me in welcoming astronaut Mike Hopkins.
Thank you, Dr. Hartman. Thank you, Goddard. It's great to be here. It's great to be back on Earth. It's kind of nice. So when we're up on station, we spend a lot of time doing the science and doing a lot of maintenance, and we end up talking to a lot of people on the ground, but we never get to see their face. So all we ever hear is voices, and so this is kind of special for us afterwards to get to come back and see some of the faces behind the voices. So it's pretty exciting. And so today I'm gonna jump right into kind of sharing the 6-month on ISS experience. And so I have a video. We'll run through that video. I'll narrate it as we go, and then at the end, hopefully, we'll have plenty of time for some questions and answers. So if we could go ahead and just roll the video, and you can see what I was doing from I guess really September last year to March of this year. Okay, so training to launch to the ISS takes about 2.5 years. And what you see here is kind of the culmination of that, the end of that. And this is exams, final exams. Yeah, for all you students, it never stops. You're always learning, always taking tests. And this is our final test before we launch. And so you can see behind there is the Soyuz simulator. And we're getting ready to crawl inside of that and spend about 6 hours going through various procedures and emergencies before we get to launch. My two crewmates, Oleg Kotov and Sergei Ryazanskiy, both Russian cosmonauts, absolutely fantastic. Here we see the Soyuz rocket down in Baikonur in Kazakhstan. So we do a lot of that training you saw was at Star City outside of Moscow, but now at this point we're down in Kazakhstan. And so we're getting ready to walk out to the vehicle there. It's about 3 in the morning. There's a lot of tradition in the Russian system, I guess, and so we end up shaking a lot of hands before we finally get into the rocket. But it's a great day when that finally does happen. Just so you know, when you're still not quite sure at this point if you're ever going to launch. So 2.5 years, you're always kind of worried that it's not going to happen, and because you might get sick, you might get hurt, or something like that. So when you're listening to this,
ignition.
There's a big sense of relief, because now you know, okay, they can't take this away. I'm actually going.
And the Soyuz is now
so this
on its way
ride,
with Mike Hopkins,
pretty smooth
Oleg
ride
Kotov,
actually,
Sergei
not too
Ryazanskiy
bad,
on a 6-hour
but
ride
it
to the
takes about 9
International
minutes.
Space Station.
9 minutes from that point until we're actually up in orbit. So it's a pretty quick ride. You do go through a little bit of G as you're going up, about 4 Gs or so, but not too bad. There is 3 stages to the rocket, and that's when it's kind of dynamic. When one stage stops and the next stage kicks in, you'll kind of get thrown forward and back in your seat a little bit. And you're going to get a view here soon of what it's like. There you can see inside the Soyuz. So that's me on top, my 2 Russian crewmates down below. But you can kind of get a sense of just how crowded the Soyuz is. It's not very large, but at the same time, it gets you there. So this actually is the approach to the space station. Actually, I said 9 minutes to get up into space, and it's only 6 hours before we're docking with the space station itself. The docking is automatic. However, if anything should go wrong, Oleg, he can take control of it, and we can do a manual docking. And so kind of an interesting story. So at this point right now, I've been in space for maybe about 5 hours or so, 6 hours. And it's a pretty weird feeling the first time you're up in microgravity. For me, I actually felt like I was falling. So if everybody was to hang upside down off the lights up here and then let go, and that falling, that's how I feel at this point when I'm docking to the International Space Station. So pretty weird feeling, that dream, and you never quite wake up in this case. You just keep falling and falling and falling. At this point, though, we've got a little more work to do. It takes about 2 hours before you get the pressures equalized and all that.
The 2 crews.
And
Official
there you can
time,
see us
11:34
coming
p.m.
into the
Central
space
Time,
station for the very first
12:34
time.
a.m. Eastern Time.
So I get asked about the mask, the surgical mask and all that. So Oleg and Sergei are both doctors, and so they thought it'd be a good joke to show up as the medical team, but I'm actually an engineer, and so you definitely don't want me doing any medical procedures on you. But this is one of those neat days. One that you never forget either is when you first show up on the space station. And what you're going to see soon, so right after we get on board the space station, we'll go into the service module, the Russian service module, and we'll have a conference. And it's kind of neat because that conference is with our families. So our families are actually, they've gone over to Kazakhstan as well. And so they were there for the launch, got to watch it live. And when we docked 6 hours later, that's my wife and my 2 sons. You can see how thrilled they look. Dad's in space. But actually, it's a very long. There's my brother and mom as well. It's a very long day for them. In fact, it's a much longer day for them, because you can imagine the excitement for me to be in space and everything. But for them, they've been up probably at that point 24 hours or so, and they have a longer day ahead still. So But I put that in there because I think that's a side of the story that we often don't think about, and that is, you know, astronauts, we get to do an amazing job and have amazing experiences, but you know, you can see there the advantages of microgravity, which is kind of neat. But when we're up there, we have family members at home, people that care about us, that maybe it's not as thrilling for them. It's more a little nerve-wracking for them as well. So what you're looking out there is the cupola. There's home for the next 6 months then at this point. And what you're going to see next is...
I've been on station now for what, an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So I'm going to open up the windows to cupola and see what the view's like.
So
here.
the cupola is the big window that looks down at the Earth, and there it is. That's my views for the next 6 months.
Takes your breath away.
Yep, it's a true statement. It does take your breath away. It's something that never got old. Seeing the Earth from that vantage point is truly incredible, and it's an experience that I wish everybody had the opportunity to see. So yeah, that is the cupola there. We often get asked what a typical day is like on station, and there's really kind of 3 main things that we do while we're up on station, and one of those you're seeing now is maintenance. We actually have to do a lot of repair work, so like everybody's house, things break, things need to be cleaned, etc. And so one of the things I'm doing right now is the audio system. We had to change out an ABC, an audio bus coupler. And these are kind of fun days because you can see you see that rack. That's how everything on station, we talk about it in terms of racks, what rack is it in. And it's a fun day because we actually get to rotate this rack and get kind of into the guts of the station. And that's something we don't do every day, but when we do get to do it, it's a lot of fun. And you can also see kind of the advantages of microgravity in terms of working. Things are obviously very light, so it's easy just to, you know, that audio bus coupler, I don't know how much it weighs, but probably, you know, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, and yet you can just very lightly move it around and put it in place. The other thing you're going to see here in a little bit too is another advantage of microgravity, in that you know, you've got this rack rotated, and you'd think it's kind of blocking the whole module out, but you'll see Rick and Koichi here. It's very easy to move around and to get out of the way of things, and so that's pretty good. More maintenance here. WHC, that's a fancy word for the toilet there. And the toilet requires a lot of maintenance. In fact, when the toilet breaks, everything else stops until you get it fixed. So actually, this is just routine maintenance. That is the fan that provides the suction for the toilet, and we just have to swap that out. Here's the carbon dioxide removal assembly. These are the little valves that I had to clean and stuff like that. So maintenance is one of the big things. Another thing that we have to do a lot is exercise. So what you just saw in those pictures, that doesn't work very well for staying in shape. So we have 3 main pieces of equipment. You're seeing the ARAD there. That's our weightlifting equipment. And then T2 was the treadmill that I was on. On the treadmill, you can see I have to wear a harness and strap down to it to stay on it. I don't normally run that fast. That's the actual orientation of ARAD. So if you were looking at it in terms of an up or down, that's how we lift. And in fact, that cupola is right below me there as I'm lifting. This is the Cevis, that's the exercise bike. So that's our 3rd piece of equipment that we use. And we actually spend 2 hours a day is hard scheduled for us to exercise. Very important for us. Of course, we have muscle atrophy, the bone gets weaker. You can see Koichi floating through there. That's the actual WHC. That toilet is right in the midst of our gym. And here's just one of the other things that we do on the side is you look out the window, and this is the view of the Earth at night, and you can see just how incredible it is. You can see how thin the atmosphere looks from 260 miles up. It really gives you an appreciation for it. But what do you guys do a lot here, and what our prime goal up there is science. And so we actually had ants in space at one point. They came up on Orbital 1, which was launched out of Wallops. Another thing that a lot of times we are the test subjects, the guinea pigs, and we've had issues with the eyesight, and so there we're seeing a couple ways that we take images, including our own ultrasounds. A lot of the experiments that we do we are actually the hands, the eyes, the ears for the principal investigators on the ground. And so Spheres is one of those experiments. So right now you can see I've got a headset on, so I'm actually talking to the scientists on the ground as I execute this test. And that's a lot of fun when we get to interact directly with the scientists as we're going. A lot of the other ones, we actually enable them. So here is a combustion chamber, and I'm replacing some of the hardware in it, some of the fuel reservoirs, some of the igniters. And basically what will happen is you're going to see I'm going to put this back into the rack that it came out of. I'll close it up, and then scientists on the ground, actually out of Marshall, will execute the experiments many times while we're asleep. And so that's where we're not executing the experiments hands-on, but we're enabling. You can see Koichi going by there as I'm finishing this up. So that's just gives you a sense of the various types of experiments and the astronaut involvement. It really crosses a wide range of areas that we're involved in. So that's the typical day for us: maintenance, exercise, and science, with a little bit of looking out the windows. Then you have some special days, and these are very exciting days for us as well. If everybody remembers back in February, what happened in Sochi, Russia, that was the Winter Olympics. And so here you can see that's the Olympic torch came up with us. So that was pretty unique. Normally there's 6 people up on station, and 3 of them will come down before 3 will go back up. In this case, 3 came up because they brought the Olympic torch, and it was up there for 5 days. And then the 3 that were scheduled to come home brought it back with them. So that was a lot of fun. The torch was not lit. Fire on station is a bad thing. So we don't tend to have open flame up there, but it was still pretty special to have the torch there, and to have nine astronauts and cosmonauts on board. Again, that's pretty unique for us as well. We actually did have a relay up there, so we started in the Japanese segment, or the Japanese module, over to Europe, down through the US, and then back over to Russia. So that was fun. And then the other neat thing that you're going to get to see here very shortly is the Russians actually took the torch out on an EVA. And so again, that was pretty special. That torch actually was the torch that was used on the final leg of the relay going into the stadium. And one of the other neat things that you're going to see with this video coming up, again, the advantages of microgravity, you're going to see the views of the Earth on this EVA. Truly remarkable. I guess first though, it's kind of a sense of what it's like to move around. You just barely touch the walls and you can just float through. It's a pretty nice way to get around. It doesn't take much effort, and it's pretty fun. Actually, it's a lot of fun. So there you see the views of the Earth and how stunning they truly are. And what also is pretty amazing about this video is it was actually taken with a GoPro camera. So pretty neat to see. You know, that little case that's waterproof that you can use it with is also space-proof. But the images, how clear it is, and that's what it looks like when you're out there on a spacewalk. Because now all of a sudden you're not looking through all of these different layers of glass and everything, and there's no atmosphere up there, right, that we're having to look through. So things become very, very clear. So actually, if we could pause right here real quick, while I still have the station up there. Can we back up just a smidge? I think there's, yeah, here we go. Can we back up just a little bit if that's possible or not? Sorry I didn't catch it quick enough for you. But on the outside of the space station, well, I'll go ahead and do it here, but we have 2 cooling systems, and those cooling systems get rid of all of the heat from the inside. So we have a water cooling loop in the inside that then has a heat exchanger and takes it out to an ammonia cooling loop, and there's 2 of them. And one of them right about here, I know it's hard to obviously tell, but there's a pump module on this side and there's a pump module on that side that controls that ammonia loop as it's going. We can go ahead and roll again. And that pump module had a little valve in it that had failed. And so we had to, this was unplanned, and so we had to go out, Rick Mastracchio and I, on 2 spacewalks and repair that. So pretty exciting times. from the time the failure happened to when we went out the door was about 2.5 weeks, I
Inch our
think,
way
a
around
little
the
more
space
than that.
station
So it was a
to get
very
to the
busy
foam
time
pump
for us.
and replace it
This was
with a
right
spare.
before Christmas. In fact, the second EVA that you're going to see is on Christmas Eve itself. So that's Rick and I outside. We're going over to get the spare pump module at that point. I also, again, I put, you're going to see some scenes here as well of Rick and I, our wives. And again, just to kind of highlight the fact that we're having the time of our lives out in space, and yet our spouses are sitting there watching us do this real time. That's me on the arm with that pump module, and hanging out on the edge of the Earth like that was pretty incredible. A neat experience. There you can see we're putting the pump module into its place after we'd already pulled out the old one at that point, or the failed one. And the first spacewalk lasted about 5.5 hours. The second one was about 7.5 hours. So these are pretty long days. It takes us about 5 hours even to get out the door. So by the time it's all said and done, it's a long day for us, because then even after you come back in, you still have a lot of work to do. But obviously, there's a lot of stress that goes with it. Koichi actually was on the inside. He was the guy operating that robotic arm. Did just a wonderful job, and the ground team did a fantastic job as well. And so you're pretty busy while you're out there, obviously. But at the same time, you do get a few times to just kind of look around and enjoy the view, and sometimes we have a chance to take a few pictures as well, and I think you'll see one of those. Yeah, that's me. People often say in this one that I photobombed the Earth. So, all right, so moving on, another kind of special day. So this is actually real close to here. This is Wallops, and that's the Orbital 1 Cygnus vehicle that was launched. And so this is how we get supplied. Actually, there's two commercial contractors here in the U.S. that supply us, SpaceX and Orbital. And so we had an orbital vehicle come up, and there you can see it approaching the space station. So that cupola window that we've been showing you, that shows the great views of the Earth, is also what we're using to see the vehicle as it approaches. And in fact, in there are the controls for this robotic arm. You can kind of see that, and that's what Rick is describing here. The vehicle basically comes up to about 10 meters from the station, and then it goes into formation with us, and I reach out with the robotic arm and grab onto it, and then at that point you then berth it to the station itself and go through the process of opening the hatches and everything. So this is kind of another one of those, you're a little bit nervous as you're doing this, a little bit intense, because that's our food, that's our clothes, that's new science and all that. So if you mess this up, it's going to be, you might go a little bit hungry. So you're very happy when that opportunity happens to capture it and you actually get a hold of it. So it's a big relief.
So there you have it.
And here you're going to see the vehicle itself. There it is, berthed to the station now. And I'll actually, if we can turn this up a little bit.
Once Cygnus is docked, it usually takes 2 hours to open the hatch. But today, it's taking even longer because we're having problems getting the hatch open.
Hello, everybody.
Cygnus is unmanned, so there's definitely, you can turn it back down a little bit now. But yeah, so there's, there's funny moments up there like that where things don't work exactly right. So that was definitely one of those. But now you're looking inside what it looks like when a supply vehicle comes up to us. And so again, this is a fun time for us. You get new goodies up there, you get new science, you get clean clothes. So that's all very good. One of the other things that happens with this that's special for us is usually you get a little care package from home. And so that's fun, and here you get to see us opening. That's the care package for the three of us that our families put together. And it'll be a variety of things. You'll get cards, you'll get notes, maybe pictures, and sometimes, a lot of times, there's food in there. Food becomes very important for you, and one of the things you're going to see here very soon, right there.
Look at that.
You laugh. Those are the best tortillas. I tell you what, that was absolutely fantastic to have fresh tortillas. In fact, they didn't last very long. No, we went through those pretty quick. Actually, you can see too, we're in node 1 here, which is where we tended to eat. If anybody's from Connecticut, Rick's from Connecticut, and that's a local hot dog relish, pepper relish that he absolutely loved. And I have to admit, I've kind of been hooked on it now too. So yeah, we're gonna eat like kings. We did. We ate like kings. There you can see. That's about 5 minutes after we opened that up. So if you're laughing, that's a true story. You can see too, Koichi's gonna let go of some food here. How easy it is. You know, you can just let go. It's not gonna go too far away. So it's that's a good day, a very good day. One of the important things about this vehicle, about the orbital vehicle, is it comes up, brings all of those supplies up, and we take all of that out. But then afterwards, we load it up with the trash. We generate, believe it or not, a lot of trash. And here you're going to see at this point the vehicle, we've fully loaded it with trash. And you're going to see the arm back away from it. And then afterwards, it's going to do its deorbit burn, enter the atmosphere, and burn up on atmosphere. So that's how we get rid of the trash. And again, it's extremely valuable and important for us because like all these clothes I talk about and everything, we don't have a washer and a dryer up there. So you wear it, we have a certain rate that we get to wear it at, and usually you know when it's time to throw it out. And then it goes in the trash, all the food packets and everything like that as we eat, it goes into the trash. So you generate a lot, and this is a good day. The station smells a little bit better at this point. So that's fun. So,
and our dirty laundry
yeah, this
and
is
food trash will turn to vapors and a bright spectacle.
Yep, bright spectacle, that's right. One of the other things that I oftentimes get asked about is how do we stay in touch with your families and friends? And actually, we stay in touch quite well up there. And NASA does a wonderful job of giving us an opportunity. That's actually my house. We didn't take that from space, but you know, this just gives you a sense. Here's my wife again and the day-to-day activities. This was actually some video that was taken for a live show that was done with Nat Geo. And but I highlight this because you're going to see one of the ways in that we were able to keep in contact. We actually have a video conference that we get to do once a week with our families. And so Julie has an iPad, and it has a net meeting on it. And it so happened my boys play hockey, and there was a couple times when that conference time lined up with their hockey games, and I was actually able to watch live as my son was playing a hockey game. So it's very, very special for me. You can see Julie there with the iPad. You know, the resolution was pretty good, but again, this is just one of those ways that we get to stay in touch with our families that really makes the 6 months away from home you know, that much easier. And if you know hockey, we were offsides there. Very frustrating, but yeah. But again, that's pretty special. The other way we stay in touch is we have an IP phone up there, so we actually go through the Teeter satellite down to Houston and get put out on a normal phone network, or the phone lines, I guess, at that point, and we can call anybody on their cell phone, and that happens quite a bit. But unfortunately, the 6 months goes pretty quick. I say unfortunately, but also fortunately, this is those bittersweet moments. You're leaving space, and you're sad to leave space. It's a great place to work. It's an amazing job to have the opportunity to do, but at the same time, it's time to come home, be a husband, be a dad again, and so that day finally arrived. So that vehicle that we came up in, the Soyuz, it's been docked the whole time while we were up there as well. That's been our lifeboat. So if anything should have happened up there, either a fire or a depress or something like that, that's what we would have gotten home in, and it's what takes us home at the end of the day. So you saw the docking, automatic docking that happened, and here's the views of leaving, and that's us as seen from the station. So that vehicle right now, there's 3 parts to it. What's going to happen is there's going to be a deorbit burn about a half an hour before we enter the atmosphere. And then right before we enter that atmosphere, those 3 pieces are going to separate. We're in the middle part, the descent capsule, and this is kind of a view out the window as we're entering the atmosphere at this point. So what you're seeing is the plasma and basically pieces of the capsule burning off. The G-loads are starting to come on at this point, and then eventually the chute opens up at 10 kilometers and you land in Earth. This was over in Kazakhstan again. A lot of snow that day, but we felt
Thanks,
Felt
Oleg.
pretty good. There's Oleg.
Thanks for getting me home.
Yeah, he was the commander of the Soyuz, and he did just a great job of getting us there. So, you know, at this point, the feeling is different. Gravity is heavy, and when you haven't been in it for a while, you definitely notice it. And but at the same, so right there is actually interesting. You saw me kind of just having to lean over to get out the hatch of the helicopter. At that point, my vestibular system is all messed up, and I actually felt like I was just going to fall straight over on my face. That wasn't much of a movement, but it was enough to make it feel like that. And even leaning over to get into the vehicle there. So at that point, we're still over in Kazakhstan, but very quickly we get on to an airplane that brings us right back to Houston. So within 24 hours of landing in Kazakhstan, I was home in Houston. So again, NASA does a great job of taking care of us and getting us home. At that point, we go into a post-flight phase, and that lasts about 6 months. The first couple of months are dedicated to rehabilitation, a lot of medical exams, medical tests, experiments, because we are the guinea pigs, so they want to get as much data as they can before we've readapted to 1G. We do a lot of debriefs. And then we kind of go into a 4-month public relations phase where we get to share the story. And that's where I am right now, and that's what I'm getting to do right now. And it's a great story to share. It's a lot of fun to talk about. It's great to see the videos. Believe it or not, you know, it's been 3 months. And unfortunately, you quickly forget what it's like to float. And so it's nice to see the videos to kind of remind us of what that is like. So that's 6 months on station, and that's pretty similar to what you're going to find for most everybody that goes up now. And so at this point, I would happy to take any questions that you may have.
Hi, I'm Francis.
Hello.
So I have a question about your schedule. What happens when you get sick? How does your schedule change?
Okay. What happens when we get sick? So we try to avoid that. One of the ways we try to avoid that is actually we go into a quarantine period before launch. And so I guess probably about 10 days before we do launch, we're somewhat isolated. You know, we still have to be around people and everything, but everybody that has contact with us has to go through medical exams and all that to make sure no one is sick. And so that's one way we avoid getting sick. Second, though, on orbit, we do have quite a bit of medical capabilities. So we actually have all kinds of meds. We have defibrillator up there if we should get to that point. And you know, the EpiPens and everything that might be needed if there was any kind of emergency. And at the same time, we also have flight docs that are on the ground. We actually have a conference with them once a week. It's a private conference that we're able to share any issues that we may be having, and then they can prescribe anything that might help us out with that. So in general, there's not a lot of colds or flus or anything like that go around up there. Because again, if you took that up there, then pretty much everybody's going to get it with the way we have to recirculate the air and everything. But again, we've got the flight docs and the equipment on board if we had to get better.
Please come to the microphone stands to ask your questions.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a little about orienting yourself in microgravity. Like,
Yeah.
do you get a little confused wondering where up is? Or?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. So I mentioned when I first got into space, I had that feeling of falling, and that lasted probably for about 18 to 24 hours. In 6 hours, though, you know, we docked with the station, we go on board the station, and of course there's no up and down, but I felt like the whole station was flying left wing low. You know, I don't know why, but that was just the sense that I had. That went away probably in about 24 hours or so. But again, you still want to, you know, we're definitely rooted in 1G, and so everything you want to do up there, you think in that fashion. And the laboratory, or all the modules, we kind of talk about a deck, a port, starboard, and an overhead. But of course, the advantage is we've got equipment in all of those locations. And there's a point when you first get up there, you know, you'll typically work at a rack where you'll have your feet pointing down at the deck and you'll do everything in that orientation. But then something happens along the way that you'll be working on something and you'll kind of just get yourself in an orientation to do the job right, and then you'll kind of look around and realize, oh, I'm standing on the ceiling. So your mind, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Your mind starts to adapt to it. to where you don't think about it. That for me probably was about in the 2-week point where that, you stop noticing up or down. And it's really cool because I remember when I first got there, I was in node 3 with Karen and Luca, and we're having a conversation, and Karen's upside down and Luca's sideways to you, and I'm just sitting there going, wow, this is really cool. But then eventually that goes away too, and you'll be in those kind of orientations, having conversations, and it's just normal. And it's pretty amazing how that happens. So the mind does eventually accept the fact that there's no up or down. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Did you ever get sick, like from the quick transition going up to this station?
Okay, so
and then going
transitions,
down?
yeah, the transitions can be, they can be very provocative, no doubt about that. I did not get sick. However, I also, I did take medications before launch, and then I also took medications before landing that most likely helped me out a little bit as well. Again, I had all of that, I felt weird, the vestibular system was all messed up, but I didn't have any nausea or anything like that. And it's different for everybody, and that's what's it's kind of weird about it, is you just don't really know how you're going to react to it until you actually go. Yes, sir.
Sort of a 4-part question on one topic.
Okay.
How much sleep did you get?
Uh-huh.
And did you sleep similar to the sleep patterns you have on Earth? Mm-hmm. And how are your dreams?
Yeah,
and do you still dream about space?
Yeah, okay. So the sleeping. So we have a crew quarter on board. That's kind of our private space. It's about the size of a broom closet. Again, because there is no up or down or anything like that, we took a sleeping bag, you strap it to a wall, and you crawl inside it at night and sleep. We're actually on GMT time, and that's what we're on. Of course, we're going around the Earth 16 times a day. So a lot of sunrises and sunsets, but we don't really see it that much because you'd have to be at the cupola looking out to really notice that. So, from a nighttime or getting adjusted to the time, you just at night, 10, 11 o'clock, you turn out the lights, and in the morning you wake up and turn on the lights. And so from a circadian rhythm standpoint and all of that, you get adjusted just like traveling anywhere, going over to Europe or Russia or anything like that. Sleeping was pretty comfortable up there. I certainly got about the same as what I get on the ground. 5 to 6 hours is what I tend to sleep, and that was more than adequate up there. Again, it was pretty comfortable. It's interesting though. There was one thing, when you have a busy day and maybe you've done a lot of exercise or something, you're kind of tired, your legs are tired, everything like that, and when it's time to go to bed, you lay down on the bed, and there's just that sense of relaxation, right? And you don't get that in space because you're always off your feet. You're always. And so that's certainly one thing I noticed just from a mental standpoint of what a little bit different. In terms of dreams, yeah, I dreamed up there. Did I dream about space? I'm not quite sure. I'm not one of those that remembers my dreams very well. So I don't know if there was anything really special with them. I certainly dream even when I'm awake now about being back up there, though. Yes, sir.
What food did you miss the most?
So fresh produce. The fresh apples, the bananas, the oranges, those kind of things, fresh vegetables. Everything that we're eating is, most of it's radiated type food, dehydrated type food, or you do get a few normal things like granola bars and stuff like that. But fresh produce, sometimes when these visiting vehicles come up, if they had enough space, they'd slip in a few apples or something like that for you. And that, again, was kind of special for us. But that was really what I missed the most.
I had a second question.
Yeah, you bet.
What would you say needed the most improvement in any field?
Yeah, that's a great question, because part of what I mentioned in that first 2 months, we do a lot of debriefs, and that's exactly what they're trying to find out is, are there things that we need to improve on and all of that. In general, I would say that life on station is very, very good, and there's not a lot, there's always improvements that can be made, but in general, I'd say everything is pretty good. The operations up there at a great state, the things like the food and the clothes, the communications with your families, the communications that are organized right here at Goddard through the teeter satellites, that's all very good. In fact, right now we have 4 space-to-ground links, so we're able to, all 3 of us in the U.S. segment at any one time can all be on a separate loop talking to scientists, talking to the maintenance guys. The procedures that we use are all extremely good as well. So at this point, I'd say anything that I would have a recommendation for would be very, very minor, and so not a lot of differences are needed. Let's see, where do we want to go? We'll start here.
Hi, I had a question about the failed pump modules that you fixed. Did you discard them in the Cygnus? Were they too big to fit?
Yeah, they're too big. Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, one of the things it highlights is, so the shuttle, it retired just a few years ago, and the shuttle was the only vehicle we had that could bring up some of the things like the pump module. And so what they did is, before the shuttle retired, they brought up as many supplies or parts and pieces that they thought they might need that were very large like that. So that failed one is actually still on the outside of the space station. It's hooked up to the mobile cart there on the POA, and in fact, in a future EVA, they're going to have to take that and put it back where we got the new one from. So yeah, it's too big to bring inside. It's too big to go into one of the vehicles. There's a possibility that it could just be discarded, which would be kind of a fun day if you're out there for that. But it's not clear at this point. I think most likely it's going to get stored and it's just going to be there till the station's done. Yeah.
What's the most interesting part about doing a spacewalk?
What's the most interesting what about a spacewalk?
What's the most interesting part? Like, what
did
you
part
find?
of the spacewalk, yeah. Okay, pretty easy for me. Well, the two things. I'll describe two things that were pretty interesting about it. The first is when you first open up that hatch and you look out at the Earth and the vacuum of space, and you're going, holy smokes, well, that's that. What am I doing? How did I get to this point? So it's definitely going through your mind. But if you remember seeing me on that robotic arm when I had a hold of that pump module, so in the suit, it's a pretty tight fit, but you still have a little bit of room, so you still kind of float in the suit. So when you're on that robotic arm, we're on a plate, and it's got a couple of toe loops that you stick your toes through, and then your heels are kind of clipped in. And you've got my toes are curled over, and my heels are really pressing down hard because you want to make sure you stay on this thing. Well, that 800-pound pump module, it's got mass, right? And so even though it doesn't weigh anything, it still, once it gets going in a direction, it wants to keep going. And at one point, I'm on the arm, it's moving, and it comes to a stop. Well, that pump module wants to keep going, and it actually kind of pulled me up a little bit in my suit. And so there was that momentary feeling of, oh my gosh, I just came off of the robotic arm, and I'm getting ready to float away into space with this pump module. I mean, it lasted 2 or 3 seconds. It's funny, as it happened the first time, kind of caught me by surprise, catches your breath, and you think, okay, I'm still here, everything's good. And then we had another maneuver, and I knew it was coming, and I had this same exact feeling when the arm stopped again. So that definitely surprised me a little bit. Yeah.
Hi. You hear astronauts sometimes speak about the first time they see the Earth from space. They speak about feeling a sense of unity of the Earth. Is that something that you yourself experience?
Yeah, absolutely. You see the Earth from that vantage point, and you don't see borders. You see this very thin atmosphere that protects us. So it certainly gives you a new appreciation for the Earth. One of the other things I would say about being up there and seeing it, I'd never found a part of the Earth that I didn't find amazing, beautiful to see from space, including things that you probably wouldn't even think would be neat to see, like deserts, right? I mean, that's just a bunch of sand. But then when you see it from 260 miles, you get this perspective of these sand dunes that have been shaped by the wind, and they're these amazing geometric patterns that just stretch for hundreds of miles, and it's truly incredible. So absolutely, you have that sense. It gives you a greater appreciation of the Earth that we live on. You bet. Yeah.
What did your crew members do, the doctors? Were they just medical officers?
Oh, no. So everybody, all of the astronauts on board the space station are generically trained, if you will. So even though we come from a wide variety of backgrounds, doctors, I'm a flight test engineer from the Air Force, we got pilots, we've got scientists, we've got, there's geologists or teachers. So astronauts come from a wide variety, but for the space station operations, we're all trained very generically. So we all have to be able to go out on that spacewalk. Koichi was in on the robotic arm, but he could have been out the door as well. We all have to be able to operate the robotic arm. We all have to be able to operate the science experiments. There's some differences between which ones we're test subjects for, but in general, we're very generic in our training.
So why would they send doctors to space?
Again, they have a lot of experience. You know, flight docs are a part of all the military services as well for the flying community. So they have a lot of special knowledge about what's happening with the body in these kind of environments. And so it's just an experience base that is beneficial for being an astronaut. And yeah, again, that's just, you know, it's a skill that's useful. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your time.
Yeah, you bet.
2 quick questions. Do you have any mementos from space? And you mentioned the smell.
Yeah, okay, you've heard that one. Okay, so mementos from space. Yeah, we're very fortunate in that we do get to take a few things up with us. And of course, every ounce, every pound counts. And so again, we're lucky that we do get to take things up. I took a few things up with me. I've got a very good friend who is a World War II vet, and I took up a Purple Heart for him. My father was a Marine pilot in the Marines, and I took up his logbook and logged the flight in that. So you know, a few things like that I did take up, and then smell. And when he mentions smell, I'm not in that case talking about what it smells like inside the station. When that vehicle, like the orbital you saw, when it docked, and you know, initially that space in between the 2 hatches, that vestibule area, is at the vacuum of space. And then, of course, we equalize the pressure in it before we open the hatch. And so when we first open that hatch from the station, there is a very distinct smell. And when I opened the hatch for the orbital demo vehicle, Karen and Luca were there with me, and I kind of mentioned, I said, yeah, that's the smell of space. And I don't know, you know, I try and describe it as kind of metallic or an ionization type smell. You know, I don't know. It smells like space. Clearly, it's not what space. You know, it has something to do with the vehicles and all of that. But you know, it started with that vacuum, and then it's very noticeable, and it happens when you go out on the spacewalks. You come back in, the same kind of thing. So it's very unique, and I wish I had a better way to describe it. It's kind of like, you know, what's it taste like? Tastes like chicken. It smells like space. Yes, sir.
How did being in zero gravity affect the circumstances and the results of a lot of the science that you were doing up there?
Well, a lot of the science that we do up there is specifically taking advantage of the microgravity environment. So there's certain things that are beneficial. Protein growth is unique in the microgravity environment, and so it allows scientists to learn things about these proteins that they can't find out on the ground. From the human body standpoint, you know, our bodies react to microgravity in strange ways as well. Many times it speeds up processes that happen to us here on the ground as we get older. So, for example, our immune systems. There's problems with, in fact, this is out of NIH over just on the other side of DC. The T cells are what kind of activate your immune system when something's detected. And in space, there's problems with those T cells. It gets suppressed. Well, the same thing happens as we get older. So one of the other things that space then gives us is this environment where in a much quicker time frame we can start to see not only what's happening to us, but then maybe countermeasures that potentially then could be beneficial for life here on Earth, where it takes much longer to see these same kind of results, but maybe we can find ways to counter them up in space. Yes,
hey,
ma'am.
Mike, if I could just jump in real quick.
Oh, yeah, Mark, sure.
We've got some remote sites that I just want to check in with and see if any of our friends at Wallops have any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I was wondering how the preparation process of our astronauts has changed since the first shuttle went up. He'd mentioned that he'd been quarantined and that they gave him special medications so that he wouldn't get sick. Have they always done that?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And when I was reading about that T-cell experiment that I mentioned, there was some background data on it, and it actually talked about in the early days of the Apollo program that they didn't actually quarantine them. And yet they were seeing a high rate of people being sick when they first got up on or in space. And so I think there was somewhere in there that they actually started the process of quarantining the astronauts before they launched. And then, of course, I think that transitioned through into the shuttle days. I know they did that. They did it both at JSC, and then when they got to KSC, the shuttles the astronauts were quarantined. So that's been a process that's been around. The medication part, I would say, is very astronaut unique, very individual. And so a lot of times we'll try out these medications beforehand because, of course, one of the things you want to make sure is that this medication isn't going to make you sleepy or something like that, because if you're flying a vehicle into space, you don't want to be drowsy. And that impact is different for every astronaut as well. So there's astronauts to this day that don't do medications when they launch, but in my case, it worked out well, and I think it was helpful. Yes, can we jump over here? She's been waiting for a little bit. Yeah, and then we'll go. Okay.
Hi, thank you.
You bet.
I was just curious if there were ever any personal conflicts between any of the astronauts.
It's a great question. Personal conflict. Yeah, because you're in some pretty tight quarters up there for 6 months. But fortunately, we all got along very, very well. Another thing is the space station is quite large. Believe it or not, on the outside, it's the size of a football field. On the inside, we talk about the volume of a 747. So you can actually go quite a long time without seeing your crewmates if you so desire, if things are getting a little rough for you. But that actually goes into part of the process for selecting the astronauts now too, and that is how well do you get along with people, and that's probably one of the more important criteria that they look at. So if you had trouble making friends and getting along with people not only up there but also on the ground, you might find it harder to get selected as an astronaut someday. So it's very important for us. We want to go back.
Yeah, let's see. Were there any other questions from Wallops?
No, I can't see it over there.
No, don't. Yeah, I have a quick question. We live in a society that upholds privacy to a high regard. How do you deal with living in such a long period of time with a lack of privacy?
Yeah, that's you definitely are living in a fishbowl. There's no doubt about it. It's something that you do get used to. On the other hand, one of the things we will do, the cameras are typically on the space station from the time we have a morning daily planning conference that's anywhere from 7 to 7:30, and then at the end of the day we have another one at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So in general, the cameras that you'll see on in the modules, those are on during that period of time, and then once we've done with the evening DPC, they typically shut off the downlink for that so that we can have a little bit of privacy. I also mentioned the crew quarters that we have up there. Believe it or not, I mean, it's small, but it is kind of your own little space, and so you can get some privacy there. The same thing with our IP phone calls and all of that. Those are private phone calls, so it's typically not business work, and so you're able to have some private time in that way as well. So you get used to it a little bit, but it is nice once in a while to shut off the cameras as well. Yes, ma'am.
One more question. Oh.
We'll come right back to you here in a sec.
Did you felt hot when you entered the atmosphere?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do we feel hot when we enter the atmosphere? It's kind of interesting. So the sunrises on the space station can be very dramatic because you're traveling so fast, 17,500 miles an hour, and you'll kind of see this blue glow on the horizon, and then it'll kind of get orange, and then all of a sudden, boom, the sun comes up and just this very bright orange light. On the landing, as we are entering the atmosphere, we're in the shadow, and I'm sitting in the capsule, and we've got a couple windows that are one on the right and the left that are kind of behind you a little bit, and I'm sitting there and I see kind of this, things are getting bright inside, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, the sun must have just come up. And then I turned around and looked, and that scene you saw earlier, and that's when I realized, oh no, we're burning up in the atmosphere, and that's the orange glow of this hot plasma and the pieces of the capsule burning off. It did get a little bit warmer at that point. Probably more noticeable for us was the G loads are starting to come on, and so we actually got up to about 5 Gs during that landing. It's coming down through your chest, so it's not like in an airplane, but where it's coming down through your head, which can pull the blood down, and you can get that blacking out. But it did get harder to breathe and everything. But you're pretty warm already in those spacesuits as well. So it wasn't as noticeable as some of the other things that are happening at that point in time. Shall we go back to Wallops real quick? I think he had a second question, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Two quick questions. You speak of tight quarters, so just wondering if you can give us an idea of square footage of the area that you were actually staying in at the space station. And second is, was there any language barrier between you and the other astronauts?
Okay. Yeah, the actual square footage or cubic footage of the volume space, I'm not quite sure. So for everybody, I know it's a pretty young crowd here, but I think you know, for the older crowd, you know what a phone booth is like. That's about the space of our private space that we had. In general, again, we'll oftentimes describe the inside volume as a 4 or 5 bedroom house or a 747 on the internal volume. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot real quick, the second question, what was that?
Language barrier.
Language barrier, yeah. So we have to learn Russian, and that was probably the hardest part of my training, was learning Russian. Yeah. So, of course, you saw us launching on the Soyuz rocket, landing on the Soyuz rocket, and that's all in Russian. On the station itself, English is primarily spoken, but Russian is spoken as well. And so the Russians do learn English, so it's back and forth. The language barrier, I would say in general, there's typically a mix of skills in the language. And if there's a language barrier, you tend to gravitate towards where the stronger skills are. So in my case, like Oleg and Sergey, though we did everything on the launch and landings were in Russian, their English was very strong. In fact, Sergey studied over here, he worked over here. Oleg spent many years over here. At one point, he was going to fly on the shuttle. So their English was very strong. So if there was anything that actually became critical in an emergency situation and it looked like I was confused with the Russian language, they would just very quickly pop into English. But there's other crews where that mix may go the other way, where one of the U.S. astronauts may have a little bit better grasp on the Russian language than the Russian has on the English. So it really depends on the crews, but we didn't have any problems whatsoever. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Carl Hilly with the Office
Carl.
of Communications. We've been taking questions from social media for this event
Okay.
Through the hashtag #AskNASA. So the most common question was, can you take me up there with you?
Yeah. I tell you, I wish everybody got to experience being in space, because it truly is an incredible experience. It's an amazing experience, and hopefully, as this commercial crew and things like that, we're going to start seeing more and more opportunities. Maybe not in the near future, but in the not too distant future, maybe we'll see more opportunities for all of us to go up.
Maybe the second most common was, how can I get a replica of that snazzy U.S. flag flight jacket?
That flight jacket. Well, unfortunately, you have to get picked for being an astronaut, because that was issued to me.
But on a more serious note, there's, I believe we've just started an experiment to grow food on the station.
Yeah.
So I have a question from Chris D. Marshall on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
Who wants to know, would you go back, and what would you think about eating food grown on the space station?
Yeah, it's both great questions. Yeah, I would go back. It was time for me to come home, but at the same time, I would certainly go back. It's easy for me to say I'd go back right away because I know it's not likely. Because as the guy that just returned, I'm at the back of the list, the back of the line. But that's understandable. In terms of the food, I would absolutely feel very comfortable eating food that was grown up there on the space station. In fact, I actually, just on my own, I took up a few seeds with me and tried to grow some of those. I had pumpkin seeds, I had sunflower seeds, and it was pretty amazing. Very easy to germinate them, get them to start growing. But I didn't have quite the right light and the right food. So typically, about 6 weeks after they were growing, and I got some of them were about that high before they passed away. So I never got anywhere close. I think I saw some pictures of Steve Swanson up there with some of the, I think, lettuce that was growing, and it looked like actually it was big enough to be able to eat. So I think that's going to be great when that happens, when we're doing that on a regular basis. And I think if we go to Mars, I think that's one of the things that'll help with that mission. Can we jump over here real quick and get a question? Yeah.
Yeah. How much was your training before the expedition?
Yeah. The training is it's pretty extensive. So I got selected in 2009 as an astronaut, and you go into a candidate phase where you spend 2 years of kind of what we'll call basic astronaut training. That involves everything from the ISS systems, from how to the suit, the space suit, the robotic arm, but it also involves the Russian language. At that point, I was very fortunate and got selected for a mission, and that's a 2.5-year training flow. During that 2.5 years of training, I spent, or you can spend anywhere from 35 to 52 weeks in Russia, up in Star City going through training, probably 6 weeks in Japan, 6 weeks in Europe, a couple weeks in Canada, and then the rest of the time down in Houston. So we travel a lot all over the world during that 2.5 years, and again, the training is very extensive. We have a lot of, all the systems on board. We have to take these masteries on them. And same kind of thing. We've got exams on that we have to pass on the robotic arm, on the suits, and all of that before we're cleared for flight.
And was there something you did not expect from the space station?
Something I didn't expect from the station. Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One was that smell that I talked about. That was just something I'd never heard before. I don't know, Tom, had you ever heard about the smell of space before? Yeah, I don't know why no one ever talked about it, but it was definitely unique. And then the floating, I would say, was unique for me. It was just something that you can dream about it down here on Earth, but until you get up there and get to really experience it for a long period of time, you don't know what it's going to be like, and it takes a while to get used to. The first couple of weeks up there were interesting for me because you don't quite know how hard to push off. You don't quite know how to redirect yourself as you're going through a module, and so I don't know how many times I cracked my head on the hatches as I was flying through. So it took a little while to get used to that. And then, I'd say you just don't know what the Earth looks like. You see pictures, but until you really experience seeing it from 260 miles up, just amazing. Absolutely incredible. Shall we go back to social media? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're telling me this is going to be our last question for time. But,
okay. Maybe we'll get one more over here, too, that's standing up. So let's do the social media one, then we'll do him, and maybe we'll wrap it up there.
Mortimer Zilch asks, did you ever experience space euphoria or see someone being treated for it?
For 166 days, I was in euphoria, yeah. So, I don't know what space euphoria really is, but, I certainly enjoyed every minute that I was up there, and it was a privilege to be able to be on the space station, to do the work, to represent this nation, to represent NASA. That really is much bigger than any one person's dream, and so it was, again, for me, it was quite an honor to get to do that, and at the same time, you're just loving every minute that you're doing it. So how good is that? Yeah, we'll go one more question then.
Yeah, I just have a question about hair growth. Does it grow faster, slower? Did you have a barber on the ISS?
So it grows. Yeah, your hair grows up there, and so we end up cutting each other's hair while we're on orbit. So I got a funny story to tell on that. So if you're familiar with how the clippers work, maybe the women in the crowd aren't as familiar, but for the guys, we have the numbering system on the clippers and the guards, right? So you start out with a 1, that's pretty close, and then 2 gets a little longer, 3, and then 4 is a little longer. So I like to kind of have mine in that gradual. So Koichi was cutting my hair the first time, and so I said, okay, I want 1 that kind of goes up to the ear, and then a little bit higher, 2, then 3, and then 4 across the top. And Koichi's like, all right, got it. And so he starts out, we go 1, and he goes 2, and then he goes 3, and then he goes 2. So at that point we had to adjust, and we went 2 all over and cleaned it up that way. So we don't have the most skill up there as barbers, but it has to get done because your hair does grow. It grows probably about the normal. I didn't notice a big difference. Every couple of weeks I was probably trying to clean my hair up a little bit, but that one I had a few extra weeks to grow back. So I guess is that it, Mark? That's all we have time for?
And let's give Mike a big hand of applause.
All right. Thanks.
So I think, although we'll let everybody else decide, but Mike might have time for pictures. We're going to ask everybody, please, no autographs, because he does have a hard cutout today, but he can stay maybe for a few minutes for some pictures.
And Mark, if you would come up here real quick. I apologize, I almost forgot about this, and I guess Dr. Hartman left, but I do have something for Goddard that is a memo from the expedition on orbit. So this is a montage. It actually has the mission patch on it that has the name of all us on there. You see all of the crews, and then it kind of has just some pictures that highlight some of the major events that took place on board, including the spacewalks and the orbital vehicle launched right out of Wallops again. So all you guys in Wallops, thank you. And some of the science and everything. So again, thank you. You bet. Good. Wonderful. And I guess kind of in closing, I wish I had more time. I wish I could answer all of your questions. I could spend all day talking about it. It really is that incredible of an adventure, and it's fun to share. It's fun to talk about. Thank you all very much. I would encourage you. I see a lot of young faces out there. My guess is there's a few of you that have interest in doing this job, and I highly encourage that. And if I could just say a few words on that, don't ever, ever, ever give up if it's what you want to do. Find something you love, do it very well, but keep applying. It took me 13 years, 4 applications before I was selected, so I have 3 rejection letters from NASA. So if you're interested in it, it's definitely worth it. It's worth the wait, and so never give up, and good luck. Thanks.